especially just to get to know you. Anyone here at the steps we took for the first time? Hi, Autumn. Okay. Marissa. Okay. Hi.
Yeah, you are.
Still?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. All right. Brian.
Brian.
Okay.
Mike.
What's up, Mike? All right. And Mike.
And another Mike. Two
Mike
Mikes.
and Mike?
Mike and Mike.
Okay. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, please feel free to talk with me or any other sober member at the end of the meeting. Are there any AA-related announcements? Or
Robbie Alcoholic.
Go ahead, Robbie.
Tuesday night, 8 up at 8. My buddy Chad is celebrating 3 years.
Okay.
So come celebrate with him.
Hell yeah.
Do it. 8 up at 8.
8 up at 8. I like that. All right. Any non-AA related announcements?
Yes, I'm Jerry. I'm an alcoholic.
Jerry.
Hi, Jerry.
If you would, please, if you smoke, there is a spot to put your cigarette butts. It's not in the parking lot. It's on the side of the building. Also, too, we are raising some money for Dustin Price, who is for his family. He just passed, and if you would like to donate, you can throw the money in an envelope and fill it in that black box.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
All right. Guys, like I said, this meeting is called The Steps We Took. We're here to discover what the first 100 did in order to recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. Tonight, we're presenting step 6, which is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, and step 7, which is humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Tonight's presenter, his name is Jimmy. That's my man.
I'm just finish up. You go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Vince. I'm Jimmy. I'm an alcoholic. You got me in there, man. I'm mic'd up. I feel like one of them NFL players that you see that gets mic'd up and says a bunch of cuss words during the game. So I'll probably keep it a little bit cleaner than that. I am grateful to be here for you guys. I'm grateful that my brother's up here from Louisville. I'm always grateful when I get to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, because the program saved my life, saves it every day. And it's something I don't forget. I can't forget it. And it means a lot to me every time I get to carry the message. As Vince writes behind me, we are doing 6 and 7 tonight. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character and humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. I think it's funny we do 6 and 7 together, because the big book's got the 2 paragraphs, the only 2 paragraphs in reference to 6 and 7 right by each other, and it's only 2. And I was reminded of that today reading it. But I've had a change of heart about 6 and 7, because I feel like it's one of the more overcomplicated sets of steps that people go through. Now that I've had a blessing of sponsoring a couple guys and we go through 6 and 7, I've had many different ideas and ways of approaching 6 and 7 in my life and in helping other guys. I've come up with some step work on paper. I've come up with some ideas about getting character defects from the people closest to you, comparing these lists of character defects, and finding what your core character defects are. And honestly, it's turned into be a bunch of hoopla, in my opinion. Like, it was severely overcomplicated to me, and I severely have overcomplicated it to myself and a lot of people. I tend to, this round of sobriety, I've been sober since June 8th, 2019. I tend to go straight out of the book now. Like, I try to interpret this book very literally. It's part of my step 1. If I believe I'm an alcoholic and I believe this book tells me about myself, then I take these words and apply them to my life as simply as I can. So when there's only 2 paragraphs about step 6 and 7, I believe that's because it's 2 very simple steps. Once we've gotten through that 4th and 5th step and we've seen where we've been selfish and self-centered and dishonest and fearful, the list of character defects could be a mile long, but they all break down to those 4 main defects of character that we answer these questions to in our 4th step. And once we have that, and we've put the past behind us and we've shared it with God and admitted to ourselves and another person, what we're left with is the question of willingness. Am I willing to let God remove these defects of character? Am I willing to put into practice a better way of life? Am I willing to start to recognize these things as they crop up and make steps to live opposite of the way I've been living? Because if you're like me, the way you've been living has got you in recovery centers and in the hospital and in jail. And if you're lucky, maybe at an AA meeting. So, once you get to that step 7, it was just me humbly asking. I like it in the original manuscript because it says humbly on our knees, and that's the most humble I can be before my higher power is on my knees. That's me. That's a symbol, a physical symbol of my humility, of me recognizing that I'm not the one doing any of this, that it is a power greater than myself. And I like that the original manuscript says that. And it's that simple prayer, a prayer I incorporate every night. No matter what I pray about, no matter what I bring to my creator, to my higher power, the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer is there every night for me. And it's a reworking. It's like an implementation of these steps into my everyday life, because these are steps I take. They're not steps that I work one time and then I'm done with them. They're steps I take every day, repeatedly. So they put the steps in order for a reason, right? And we're going to go through 1 through 5 and get back to 6 and 7. And I will try to get us out of here by 9 o'clock. I actually took notes for this. Now, I made some notes on what I want to go through the book with you guys tonight, with a 5-year-old running crazy through my house. So bear with me if I'm a little bit all over the place. But step 1, the first step, the most important step, the only step that we have to take 100% perfect, admitting that we are powerless over alcohol, admitting that our life has become unmanageable. If you go into more about alcoholism, on page 30, it describes the idea that I had, if you're an alcoholic like me, that you had about your drinking. It says, the idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. That's what I always thought about myself in untreated alcoholism, that I could find a way myself to conquer my problem, because I thought my problem was the alcohol, the drugs, the alcohol. I thought that everything happening around me was happening to me, and that my problem was that I just couldn't put down the drugs and alcohol, that if I could only do that, everything else would fall into place and life would be great. But that just wasn't the case. Admitting step 1, the biggest part of step 1 is admitting that I am the problem, that you can take the drugs and the alcohol away and I'm still here, left to deal with life and life on life's terms. This problem is a 2-part problem, a problem of the mind and the body. And I always start on the body side, because the body side is the side we can treat. We can treat the body side the quickest. Once we treat the body side, we never have to deal with it again, as long as we never put another drink or drug in us. It's the one that can be permanently eradicated and never dealt with again. When you talk about the body, we got a physical allergy being an abnormal reaction. All right, so if I'm admitting step 1 and I'm admitting that I'm powerless over alcohol, my life becomes unmanageable. When I tell you guys I'm an alcoholic, that means I'm admitting that my body, when I put a drink or a drug in it, reacts differently than that of a normal person. It means that I can't just have one drink. I can't just have one line. I can't just smoke one pipe. And it doesn't matter how long I go without it. Once I put that first one back in me, I'm right back in the same boat. Dr. Silkworth talks in the doctor's opinion about it very, very thoroughly, but there's just a couple things that I want to read, because he sums up pretty much the whole step 1 breakdown in one paragraph on XXV III. So we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol in these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. And he goes on to say at the bottom of XXV men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. I never really paid attention to that, man, but I grew up drinking from the time I was 15 up into my 30s. And I come to find out that the people I drank around, the people I kept in my circle, were relatively all normal drinkers. I didn't have a lot of alcoholics in my circle. And I found that out as I progressed through life, seeing them all go on to lead normal lives, like seeing them get a wife and a kid and a house and a good job, college degree. And I'm sitting there wanting the party to never stop. You know, I didn't want to stop the party. And when I couldn't find somebody to drink with, it became real easy to sit there and drink by myself. And the resentment that I had back then, when I look back on it, started real small. Like I was like, they can't hang with me. You know, like they can't hang with me. I can drink every night and get up and go to work. I can do cocaine all night and get up and go to work. They're lame. You know, that's where resentments for me started forming when I look back on it now, and I didn't see it at the time. But what that turned into, the resentment I had turned into a lot of loneliness. Bill Wilson talks about it in Bill's story about the loneliness and despair that only few know. It's pretty poignant because I used to sit and think that my life was so bad and I was so alone when all of my friends would have been happy for me to come over. It was me who pulled myself away to drink and drug by myself. And, you know, that physical allergy crept up on me. It got to a point just with alcohol, without even getting into any drugs, where I was going to work and the phenomenon of craving would kick in on me. Phenomenon's an unexplained event. So it was an unexplained craving that I could not control. I would wake up in the morning, living in downtown Louisville, stop at a liquor store that opened at 7 a.m., get that half pint, go work right next door, right down the block from the liquor store, go work till lunch, take lunch, go get another half pint, go home, come back right after work. It was a pint. And I did this repeatedly every day. And people would know I was drinking. They would smell it on me or whatever. And my boss would call me in his office and I would just point blank be like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. And it went on like that for a long time. It went on. That phenomenon of craving converted into where alcohol wasn't enough anymore, where I had to seek other forms of that ease and comfort that they talk about in the book. And I've talked before, my well-known sprees, you know, I wasn't the type to just get drunk and then you didn't hear from me for 2 weeks. My well-known sprees ended up lasting months at a time. And, you know, normally the worst of them would come after through like the self-control, the mental control that I thought I had. I might put together 2 weeks of dry time, a week of dry time, 3 days of dry time. And I would convince myself, and I know some of y'all probably done this, when you've been doing good in your mind, you think you're doing all right, and the first thing you want to do is call your buddy that you get high with or call your dope boy just to hang out. Right. You don't want nothing. You just gonna go show them how good you've been doing. You know what I'm saying? Go kick it with them for a little bit, and before you know it, you're 2 weeks into spending all your check before you got it, and if you're like me, at the Target and the Walmart, still in the prepaid phones, just so you can sell them to the Eco ATM. Yeah, oh yeah, Eco ATM. I was a friend of theirs.
That's good.
Oh yeah, and it's fun. It's funny, man, because when you talk about guilt, shame, and remorse, I still feel that sometimes in a lightweight way today. Funny story, my girlfriend had a phone that the screen went out on her, but the phone still worked. And she got a new phone, and it was a Samsung phone. It wasn't a great phone, but it was a Samsung phone. And she was like, I could probably still go like sell this to the Eco ATM for $30. And I was like, no, I ain't doing that. Like totally sober, totally legal. You know, it would have been the normal thing to do. The money wouldn't have went to getting high or drinking, but I was like, nah, I ain't going to the Eco ATM. You know, like I still have bad memories of collecting like 4 or 5 junk phones just to get like $20 out of the Ego ATM and hit up the dope boy. The guilt, shame, and remorse, though, I used to have the definitions wrote down completely. Guilt, shame, and remorse for me, in its most purest form, was the feeling I felt before the last time I got sober, when I went back out on Kratom. I had a big Kratom binge, man, and I was stealing money out of my girlfriend's purse, and I knew before I even did it, I was already feeling guilt, shame, and remorse. Like she loved me more than anything. I didn't want to take from her. I didn't want to steal from her, but there was absolutely no way that I was not going into that purse before work. There was no way that I was not going to get what I thought I needed to get through that day. And when you're feeling guilt, shame, and remorse like I was before you even do it, the guilt, shame, and remorse you feel right after you do it was 10 times worse for me. It's a feeling that it's one of the best parts of sobriety is not feeling guilt, shame, and remorse for myself. And I made a lot of firm resolutions, man. I made a lot of resolutions not to get high, not to drink, and it just never worked out. There's not a lot more detail for that. That's why I love this program, because the only firm resolution I make today is I'm going to get through today without drinking, and I'm going to use the tools that I have at my disposal in the fellowship to get through the day without drinking. That's the body side. And, the mental obsession for me, I read about it, the want to be normal. I used to want to be normal. When I first came to AA meetings, I hated the fact I was an alcoholic. I used to hate the fact that I knew I shouldn't ever drink again, but I didn't want to never drink again. I didn't want to never use drugs again. And it took a recovery center, a good jail stint, a relapse, a long, well-known spree that lasted about 10 months, and another recovery center before I finally got to a point where I didn't want to have to live in this cycle anymore. Emotional buildup directly was what was feeding my restless, irritable, and discontentness. I was never going to be happy if I looked at all these things in my life, all these responsibilities as burdens. If I looked at keeping a good relationship with my girlfriend, being a good son, brother, uncle, holding a job, and being responsible and paying my bills, if I looked at living life normal as a burden, I was never going to be happy, because I was always going to feel like I was being put out by life. So what I've had to get down with in my sobriety today is whenever these things when I'm sitting in detox, when we're sitting in detox and we say, all I want is just to have a fair shot. I want to get my ride back. I want to get a job. I want to be responsible and dependable. Well, as soon as I'm out there doing this stuff and it don't feel that way no more, and it starts to feel like things are burdening me, I better get to a meeting. I better call my sponsor, and I better start looking at these steps, because that's the first way my alcoholism attacks me every time. This is describing powerlessness here, is Vince wrote. This is the problem. The problem is me. The best thing about realizing the problem is me is that I can fix me. I can't do anything about anything else going on around me, but I can take care and work on me. I tried many different solutions, including the Kratom maintenance plan that I told you about, the marijuana maintenance plan. Nothing worked. I tried just drinking like a gentleman. I tried drinking just expensive craft beer and no whiskey. I tried drinking bourbon only when I was at a bar with friends. Tried not drinking alone. I tried only drinking alone. I tried every way to not be an alcoholic, but to still get a buzz, and none of it worked. It always ended in me living in this. So when I was presented with Alcoholics Anonymous, I told myself I was going to give it a fair shot. I told myself I was going to give this two-part solution a fair shot. And the part that drew me in was the part on the left, the fellowship part here. I went to meetings. It's funny, I told a story the other day real quick at a meeting in Louisville. The first AA meeting I ever went to was in Arkansas, and it was with my dad. I was 20 years old, nowhere near admitting I was an alcoholic. And we went, he was in and out of the rooms till he passed away. We went to this meeting, and I sat there, didn't say a word, and listened to these people talk. And when we left, he said, "Oh, well, Jim, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, Dad, I think this is great that you're doing these meetings." That's exactly what I said. I said, "But this is just not me." I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. I said, "This is not me. I'm just going through that phase. I'm 20 years old. I'm just having fun." And, come Oh, did you tilt that forward on purpose? My bad. Come 15 years later, I find myself in jail actually asking the public defender to send me to treatment because I had never been to treatment before and I wanted to give it a shot. So when I first actually went to meetings and saw what Northern Kentucky had to offer with Alcoholics Anonymous, I was drew right in for real. I still didn't feel a part of because I didn't know a lot of these people. I didn't know a lot of the guys that were at the treatment center with me. And I was still in that shell, you know, when we get sober, learning to get to meetings and introduce yourself to people, to find a sponsor, to find a home group, to find people that will hold you accountable and put you to work. Like those things are difficult. And I relate to that because up here where my foundation was made in sobriety, it was hard for me. It took almost the entire time that I was in the treatment center until I was almost in the peer mentor's office before I had a fellowship. And guys like Vince would come up there and talk to everybody. And for a long time, well, that's going to look funny to GLC. For a long time, I didn't even know how to approach a guy like Vince, who was as friendly and as accepting of guys as you could find in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know how to be a social person and talk to people sober. Like that's what I had alcohol and drugs for. It brought all that out in me. So once I got sober, I mean, honestly, I told you my sobriety date was June 8th, 2019. Probably just after a year of sobriety did I really start to get back that ability to talk to people and be sober and be okay with myself. Like I'll go to meetings now and I cut up. I make it a point to cut up and have fun and laugh on purpose because it loosens me up and I think it loosens other people up around me. And the book says we're not a glum lot, you know, so if I'm not having fun in sobriety and if I'm not being myself and if I'm still feeling like I'm in some kind of shell, then something's wrong. But I did these things. I found a sponsor. He found me, actually. I found a home group, the same home group I still have, Monday Night Erlanger. And I got busy with service work, you know, and there's service work when I was in the recovery center that got me out of the house for a while. And then there's service work that I did for Alcoholics Anonymous, which was showing up early to meetings, giving guys rides to meetings, making the coffee at meetings, cleaning up after meetings, things that seem relatively insignificant in the big scheme of things. But what I came to realize as I was going through sobriety is that while I'm doing all that stuff, somehow by miracle, I'm staying sober, you know, and that's my ultimate goal, to be sober and to find God. God was on the other side of this. My God, my higher power was on the other side, the program of action. The recovery center I went to, long-term GLC, they gave me this big book. First time I ever had one. First time I was ever introduced to one. And I read it very thoroughly, and I was captivated by the doctor's opinion. Like I found myself in that. I still read it and find myself. If I ever need a reminder of why I'm sick, why I have a disease, all I got to do is read that. The 12 steps, it took me a while to get down with the 12 steps. I'm not going to lie. When I went through the 12 steps with my first sponsor, it was it seemed like busy work to me. I'm not one of those people that had a problem writing a 4-step and sharing a 5th step. I did it and I was thorough, but there was no feeling behind it. I didn't feel any type of way. And I stopped at the 9th step. I made an amends list and I made a couple of those amends. And that was my first go around through it. I didn't get a spiritual awakening the first time I got sober because I did not implement those steps into my life. When I did this go around, when I got out of RTC in 2019, the first thing I wanted to do was get with my sponsor, my second sponsor and current sponsor, and I wanted to get this 5th step out. It was a different 4-step I'd written. It was about the last year of my life up to that point. It was me getting down to the causes and conditions of why I relapsed. And we got down with that. And from there, I started to feel something. From there, I could get through these steps, make amends, and feel that free. It's funny because Jamie was here before the meeting. It was one of my first direct financial amends that I made this time. And I love it when I see Jamie because he reminds me of that feeling I got that night when the promises really start happening. The goal is to have that a spiritual awakening, to have that psychic change, that total personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. So if I get down with the fact that this is me, that this is the problem, and that this can work, I'm willing to believe that it can work and that I can possibly be restored to sanity, then I get to step 3 where I make a decision to turn my will and my life over to God as I understand him. And I do not want to forget to read y'all some of this stuff because I took the time to look at it today. You know, it talks about the third step quite a bit in the big book. And on page 13, did I go to the right page? Yeah, page 13 in Bill's story. This is after he met with Ebby Thatcher. And I can't ever recount this the way Vince does, but when Bill got sober or was in the process of getting sober, Ebby Thatcher, his buddy, came to visit him. And Vince always talks about how Ebby must have come in there looking real clean because Bill didn't recognize him. You know, Bill didn't, it was his old buddy, but he didn't recognize the man standing before him. He was a totally different person. And when he talked to Ebby and asked Ebby why he was the way he was and why he wasn't drinking, Ebby said he found religion. And Bill immediately was ready to push it to the side because Bill had all these misgivings about God and about religion. And Ebby dropped this bomb on him. He told him that you can have a God of your own conception. And once Bill heard that and the ideas start going through his head, he realized that he might be able to turn his will and his life over to a power that is greater than him, that he understood. He writes here, I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my requests bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. What Bill's describing there, to me, the way I interpret that, is the process of starting to turn our will and our life over to God as we understand him. And it is a process. It's an everyday process for me. That's why I say that third step prayer every day, because I have to ask every day for that to be done. You know, and for me, it turns into different situations throughout my day where I'm faced with like that fork in the road where God's like, all right, Jimmy, here's a situation. You can do what you used to do, or you can let me have it. And a lot of people, including myself, would have trouble with what does it mean to let him have it? It's going back to step one. It's an admission of I can't. You know, when we talk about acceptance, and in that serenity prayer, it says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That means I get an intuitive thought today. You know, like when I'm tapped in, when I'm turning my will and my life over to God, that God consciousness is giving me intuitive thoughts that I can trust. Those intuitive thoughts are telling me what I cannot change. And then every now and then I get told to have the courage to change something that I can. And that's trust in myself. Like that God consciousness is always in me. I've had that little voice in my head since I was a kid. It's learning to trust myself again, because I absolutely couldn't trust myself in the madness, drinking and getting high. Getting through that took a long time for me, because I firmly believe that I had God and also ran on self for a long time. I could pray to God and still be making decisions myself without praying, still wanting to do self-seeking was a big part for me of not working the third step. I was doing what I thought to be a lot of good, but in the end, it was to benefit me or to make me look better. And that was something I definitely had to get over. He goes on to say, flip too far. He goes on to say that this says, simple but not easy, a price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. Self-centeredness, last time I presented, Vince had a great diagram up here of self and the manifestations of self. Real quick, like we have these God-given instincts, right? We've got these God-given instincts that God gave us for a reason. The sex instinct, the financial security, the emotional security, personal relationships, ambitions. These are all instincts that we're born with that develop as we get older. When we're running on self, we're letting the things that go on in our life affect those securities in a negative way, to the point where we create a world around us where it feels totally acceptable to drink and drug. The reason I bring up the securities and being aware of how we're letting our life affect those things is because when we write our fourth step, when we go into this moral inventory, we're going to have to think about those securities. When we look at resentments, which we're told in the book are the number one offender, you know, which to me means the number one reason I drink and use are the resentments I've had at people, places, and institutions throughout my life. They're the excuses that I turned into reasons for me to drink and drug. those things affected my instincts, you know. So when we do this moral inventory, and I do mine right out of the book, as simple as possible, which is how Vince has it up here. We write the people, places, and institutions that we're angry at, that we resent, why we were angry, and the instincts. It's important to really pay attention to what was affected. And what we come to find out, what I came to find out, is almost everything that I was upset about affected me in almost every way that it could, you know? And the most important question, you heard me in the beginning talk about the four, what you can break down any defect of character into these four categories. That's why this question is important. Where had we been? Not how or had we been or if we had been, where, which means we've been it. All right. We've been these things. We got to find out where. We got to find out for ourselves. We got to find out for admitting to God. And we got to find out for the person we're talking to. Had we been self-seeking, selfish, frightened, and dishonest? If you have trouble, like I used to, with the difference between selfish and self-seeking, selfish, yeah, we're doing something only for ourselves. Self-seeking, we're doing something that could be, you know, understood as something good, possibly even helping somebody, but ultimately to benefit us, to make us look better, to further our own agenda. It was important for me to understand that self-seeking can be a major character defect that'll go unnoticed. You know, you'll be out there sober, really think you're doing the deal, and your character defects are blaring because self-seeking is running your life. You're doing everything ultimately to help yourself out. And it was the same with the instincts being affected. What I realized is everything that ever was wrong in my life, and it didn't take me long to get through this inventory and realize that I was living in this. I was living in every decision I made, running on a fear I had. And dishonesty, you know, we're always dishonest. If we haven't lied to somebody else, we're lying to ourselves. And the self-seeking and selfishness almost went hand in hand with everyone. Talked about fear in the book. It talks about fear ought to be classed with stealing because it seems to have just as bad of an impact on our life. We run on 100 forms of fear, all of that. When we go through fear, why do we have them? Why are we afraid? And these are two that are great. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Like, we have to really look and examine that. Our fears are another manifestation of self. You know, fear is a reaction. It's a defense mechanism. Something that we don't write up here that it doesn't talk about in the book, but that I do go through because my sponsor went through with me. When we look at these fears, we identify these fears. I like to look at the healthy and unhealthy fears because I do, you know, we're not supposed to share opinions, but I do believe there's healthy and unhealthy fears. You know, unhealthy fears are fears that are going to prohibit me from moving forward. You know, being afraid to ask a boss for a raise. I'm probably never going to get a raise if I don't ask for it. But being afraid of a relapse, that's not necessarily an unhealthy fear for me. Like, I think a healthy fear of relapse is a good motivator to do the next right thing. And there's all kinds of them. I like to sit down with a sponsee and look at their fears and go through together and figure out which ones are the healthy and unhealthy ones. You know, we're all going to be afraid at some point. It's nothing to be ashamed of. But letting that fear hold us back is one of the big barricades of moving forward in life. When you look at harms, you know, we got emotional harms, we got financial harms, we got sex harms. Where have we been selfish, inconsiderate, dishonest? When we hurt somebody by stealing from them, it's pretty easy to see where we've been selfish, inconsiderate, and dishonest. I think where people have more trouble is when they get to sex harms. I don't know about you, Vince. I don't know about you, Adam, Jerry. Y'all had more experience than me with this, but when it But when it comes to sex harms, I don't believe that it's listing every single person that you've ever been with. You know, it might turn into something like that, but the book tells us pretty simply with the sex harms, especially wherever you arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness. That could be in all your relationships, not just somebody that you slept with. But I think it's definitely important that we address these things and take them seriously, because some of the biggest harms that I've seen around me that I still see in my sobriety today and people around me are these sex harms that we're doing each other in sobriety. And I'm not going to not talk about the elephant in the room, man, because it happens. And you can send somebody back out, or you can send yourself back out real quick, thinking that you're doing everything else right in the program and not taking care of how you relate to people. not even just in sex relationships or people you're dating, but people in general. Like we're all, a lot of us, I'm sober a little over a year and a half. I'm still a newcomer. I feel that way a lot of times, you know, when I put myself around people like Vince and Jerry that were sober longer than me. When I first came into GLC, had a bunch of sobriety. So it's important for me to think about how I'm talking to the people around me in Alcoholics Anonymous and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. People's feelings need to matter to me today. If I want mine to matter to them, you know, that's just the way it has to be. But we get this moral inventory done, and we're confident that we're ready to share it with somebody. I do want to read this real quick about step 5. Big. Okay. Am I rushing a little bit? Well, I didn't want to go past 9, but I'm going to get to step 5 here. And Vince took me off my page. A lot of people, you know, when the big book was written, they didn't talk about sponsors and sponsorship. They didn't have the term yet. So, I mean, basically, a guy that I know, an old timer in AA, he shared his 5th step. He went and bought a pint for a drunk on the street and gave him the pint and made him listen to his 5th step. In the big book, it talks about sharing that 5th step with a priest, possibly. But if you don't have strong religious convictions, maybe finding somebody close to you, somebody you trust. But it doesn't use the word sponsor. That also says in the big book, if you absolutely cannot find somebody to share with, you might be okay to put this off, but not for a while. I think today none of us have that problem because we've got a sponsor well before we get to our 5th step, and we've established that relationship with them, and we're good with sharing, for the most part, what we're supposed to share. The book says this is perhaps difficult, though, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We would be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. I love this. My brother asked me today, what is the main reason that we have to share a 5th step? Well, it tells you the best reason is first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. That's the simplicity to me. Like when I'm told that, somebody was talking about a prayer and meditation in a meeting a while back, and everybody's talking about why they pray. Do you have to pray? Do you have to pray on your knees? It was simple to me. I said, I humbly pray on my knees because I was told to do that if I want to stay sober. Same with this 5th step. I was told I need to do it and do it thoroughly and share it with somebody if I want to stay sober. I don't want to drink again. I don't want to use again. So these things that I do, these steps that I take, I put them into practice so I can stay sober another day. And that I love that it has that reason first. He goes on to say on 73, more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. That's talking about being self-seeking again. In sobriety, we can still be that way, especially by the time that we've gotten to the point where we're ready to share that 5th step. That's why it's all the more reason that we do that, because if we're going to get honest with ourselves and our God and somebody else that we trust, that's the beginning of letting that guard down. I mean, I build walls. I've built walls in the past, and I want to be transparent today. Another personal story that just happened today. I was making my notes in that book right there. My second 4 steps wrote in the front of that book. And Michael's looking at it. My brother's looking at it. He's like, oh, your 4 steps in here? I was like, yeah. He's like, it's probably personal. You probably don't want me to read this. I'm like, dude, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't. Like, I want to be transparent for y'all today. There's nothing in either of my 4 steps today that I wouldn't stand right up here and talk about with everybody here, because I'm an open book. I don't want to live like that no more. Secrets will keep you drunk, from what I've learned in my sobriety. Now, I wasn't perfect with that. Vince and Adam have heard me talk about this. I was not perfect with that 4 step. And as I got into sobriety this time, as I got approaching that year of sobriety, some things started to eat me up, some things that I wrote in there and shared with my sponsor, but had not gotten honest about in my relationship. And it was what I thought were pretty simple things at the time. One of which, you know, I said I went back out on Kratom for 10 months. It was a 10-month Kratom well-known that I went on that landed me in RTC. But I actually did do meth 2 weeks before I went in RTC. I ate a little piece of meth. It was put in front of me. I had no mental defense and I ate it. Well, I never told my girlfriend about it that I live with. I never told her. I got out of RTC. And she actually asked me before I went in, is there anything else you did? And I said no. So not only did I not tell her, it wasn't lying by omission, I lied to her. So I go into RTC and I write this 4-step and I share it. My sponsor and I talk about it. And he's like, unless she asks again, I wouldn't bring it up because you're going to cause harm. And that was like an easy way out to me. It was. I was like, all right, she ain't going to ask about it. It's fine. Well, that didn't work once I started approaching that year sober. This spiritual awakening that was in the process of happening, my mind was changing. I was having a total psychic change where that didn't work anymore. And I started feeling some type of way about it. I started talking about it at my men's meeting on Wednesday. I started talking about it. And because I got a fellowship that holds me accountable, they were like, you're going to have to do it, man. You're going to have to get honest. So I did. I did the day before I came up here and presented for the first time back in September. And it was all bad. She was not happy. She called into question the integrity of my program, my personal integrity. And I didn't see, I come up here and talk to Vince about it that night. I did not see how this could have affected her so much, but it was destroying any like foundation of trust I'd been laying up to that point. And I see it now, I had to inventory a lot, but if I lie about that, how does she know that I'm not lying about something else? And it's that simple. I don't get the right to tell her how she should feel about what I say, and it's just an example though of what that 4-step can continue to do to you, because I thought I was done with that. I don't even know why I kept it. It was in that notebook in a drawer, but it had a way of creeping back in because of that psychic change I was having, what God was doing to me. God continues to do things to me that I don't understand. I think in ways that I never thought I would think. There's things before that I never would have considered to be dishonest that now seem totally dishonest to me. Like it truly is a new way of living and like a whole 180 from the way I used to live. I was going to read, I'd already went over sex harms. I was going to read about that. Most important thing I forgot to mention, the book says it in 2 different places. It says God alone can judge our sex conduct, and we will not be the arbiter of anyone else's sex conduct. I don't get this a lot in sponsees that I work with, but my girlfriend sponsors half of Northern Kentucky, God bless her. And I hear a lot of stories, not names, but I hear the stories, kind of like the names and situations have been changed to protect the characters. I get a lot of stories, like a lot of hypotheticals from her that describe some things that she's hearing about, because she needs to talk to somebody about it too. And she doesn't call her sponsor as much as she should either, but we'll sit there and she'll bounce these situations off of me. And one constant that we're always coming up with together is no matter what we think about anything, we're not the ones to judge. The person that we decide, our sponsor, whoever that we decide to do a 5-step with, is not the one to judge. If anything, they're the one to relate. That was my favorite part of the 2 5-steps I've shared with 2 totally different types of sponsors. One was an older guy who was a straight alcoholic, and one was a younger guy who was a pretty straight heroin addict. And they both were able to sit there with me and find similar situations in their life that related to what I was going through. We are not unique. We need that reminder that we are not unique. It's what made me feel more a part of the fellowship. I used to hear people's stories when I was at GLC. I would hear all these leads and these stories, and I'd be like, I thought I maybe wasn't an alcoholic because I didn't think I'd been down as dark of a road as a lot of the people that are. Like, I never had to sleep under a bridge. I never had to find an abandoned house to shoot up in. But that was only because I got into recovery when I did. What I come to find out is that if I would have kept going, my main road dog that I got high with a lot ended up going and doing a lot of the things that I said I wouldn't do. And if I'd have not got into Alcoholics Anonymous and got sober when I did, I'm sure I would have been right there with them. But it was finding common ground through the sharing of that 5-step that made me feel more a part of. It made me feel more accepted. And I've come to find that with any that I've heard, any 5-steps I've heard. There's always a story that I could pull from my experience that relates to what the person is telling me. But, you know, there's questions that the book tells us we should ask ourselves after we've shared this fifth step. And I always forget to do this with sponsees, and I wish I wouldn't forget. Ashley remind me about this today. So after we share our fifth step, it says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an ark through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? It says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, and it does say if we can answer to our satisfaction, we are not perfect. It's progress, not perfection. We take a look at where we're at that point. We know how we feel about the fifth step we just shared. We know where we're at, and we know the effort we've put in. So if we can answer those questions and we're satisfied with the answers, then we take a look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Are we ready? Only we know if we're ready. God knows our heart, and we know our heart. We're asking ourselves, are we ready to let God remove all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all? Every one. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. I said a prayer of willingness for a week just because my sponsor told me to. The first time I was sober, I prayed for willingness, but I didn't really know what I was praying for the willingness for. I understand today that I'm praying for the willingness to try to be better. I'm praying for the willingness to try to make the best choice with the knowledge I have and what my God consciousness is telling me. I'm trying to pray for willingness to do right and not wrong. And we know the difference. I believe in my heart we all know that difference. If I believe that I am ready, I say something like this: my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. It breaks it down very, very simply. We have then completed step 7. I want to get into the 12 and 12 real quick, because in the 12 and 12, when it talks about step 7, it talks about humility. Vince has said this before, and it actually says it right here, that indeed I don't know exactly where it's at here, but humility could be the spiritual foundation behind every step. That's what you say, and that's what I believe. We have to be humble when we admit that we're powerless. You know, when we admit that we're alcoholics, we have to be humble when we admit that something other and bigger than us is what can save us. You know, we have to be humble when we decide we can't run our life no more. We have to be humble when we admit all these things that we've done in our life. We have to be humble when we tell somebody about it. You know, humility is something that has to be attained for me. It's not something that I'm born with. It's not a God-given instinct to be humble, you know, not for me. And humility, it does say, indeed, the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each of the AA's 12 steps. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. Why do I need humility? Because without it, I can't stay sober at all. That's the biggest reason for me. Again, I try to break all these things down to what this book is telling me. I know I'm running a little over, guys, but on 74 in the 12 and 12, when we have taken a square look at some of these defects, have discussed them with another, that's the 5th step, have become willing to have them removed, 6th step, our thinking about humility commences to have a wider meaning. That's what I was saying. We've already been practicing humility to get to that point. By this time, in all probability, we've gained some measure of release from our more devastating handicaps. We enjoy moments in which there's something like real peace of mind. To those of us who have hitherto known only excitement, depression, or anxiety, in other words, to all of us, this newfound peace is a priceless gift. Something new indeed has been added. where humility had formerly stood for a forced feeding on humble pie and now begins to mean the nourishing ingredient which can give us serenity. In the big book somewhere, it talks about being able to match the calamity of life with serenity. When we have thoroughly went through and taken steps 1 through 7, for me, I finally started feeling serenity. I finally started feeling peace. All I needed to start to feel the promises, the 9-step promises, was to set out with my newfound serenity and start to make right some of these wrongs. And that's what we'll talk about next week, making that list of amends and getting ready to be able to look the world in the eye again. So thanks, you guys. This was great. I'm Jimmy, and I'm an alcoholic.